Welcome to our deep dive. We're tackling emotional intelligence today. And you guys sent in some excerpts from a guide by Jim Rees. And let me tell you, this stuff is fascinating. He uses this JCA global model. Have you ever heard of that?
I have, yeah. It's a really interesting approach, emphasizing self-regard and regard for others, which actually come from transactional analysis. It's something that therapists use to understand behavior patterns.
Oh, interesting. So we're going to be analyzing ourselves like we're on a therapist's couch today.
Hmm.
Am in. So tell me more about this self-regard thing. How does that work?
Well, think about early childhood experiences. Learning to walk, trying new things. Every time you got a cuddle for falling down or praise for taking a step, that was a positive stroke. Those strokes build up your sense of self-worth.
Okay. So basically, my parents were building my emotional intelligence way before I even knew what it was. But what happens if someone, doesn't get those positive strokes?
That's where things get really interesting. Imagine a kid who's constantly criticized or told they're not good enough. They might grow up seeking constant approval, always needing that external validation because they didn't get enough of that positive reinforcement early on.
Wow. I never thought about it like that, but it makes so much sense. So someone who's always fishing for compliments might actually be struggling with low self-regard. That's a real aha moment for me. What about the other side of the coin? What about regard for others?
Well, think about how you saw your parents interacting with other people. Were they respectful? Were they dismissive? You kind of absorb those patterns, forming your own regard for others.
Right. You kind of learn by example.
Exactly. Now imagine a scenario at work, a team meeting where someone with high self-regard but low regard for others is trying to present an idea.
Oh, I've definitely been in meetings like that. I can picture it now. That person's probably steamrolling everyone,
Yeah.
completely ignoring other people's input.
Yeah. Exactly. They kind of dominate the conversation thinking they have all the answers because, their regard for others is low.
Makes sense.
That's just one example of how these two scales, self-regard and regard for others, can really play out in real-life situations.
It's like a secret code to understanding people's behavior. But is it possible to change those patterns? Like once they're kind of set, can you actually shift them?
Absolutely. Our brains are surprisingly adaptable. Even if someone's had a lifetime of, let's say, negative strokes leading to low self-regard, they can still learn to challenge those negative beliefs and build a healthier sense of self-worth.
That's good to know. It means we're not stuck with whatever we picked up in childhood. So those two scales, self-regard and regard for others, it's like the foundation of emotional intelligence. Where do we go from there?
Well, they form the base for all the other scales, including self-awareness, which is really the cornerstone of emotional intelligence.
Okay, I'm ready to get self-aware. What does
Yep.
that actually look like?
Picture this. You're in a meeting, and things are getting a little tense. Someone with high self-awareness would notice their heart rate increasing. Maybe their shoulders getting tense, or even those butterflies in their stomach.
So they're not just going through the motions. They're really tuned in to their physical reactions. But how does that actually help them in that tense situation?
Well, because they're aware of those physical cues, they're less likely to react impulsively. They can take a breath, process the situation, and choose a response that's aligned with their goals rather than just, lashing out.
It's like having that extra moment to hit the pause button before you say or do something you'll regret later. What about people who aren't so self-aware?
Well, they might completely miss those internal cues. Imagine someone with low self-awareness in that same meeting. They might misinterpret someone's facial expression, take something personally, and react defensively, escalating the tension even further.
Yikes. I think we've all witnessed those kinds of situations. I can definitely see how lacking that self-awareness can lead to misunderstandings and conflicts. So self-awareness is key. But how do we actually get better at it? Is it something we can, practice?
Yeah, it's like building a muscle. You have to work at it. Practices like mindfulness meditation can really help. You learn to pay attention to your thoughts and feelings, but without judgment. So you're building that awareness over time.
Mindfulness seems like the answer to everything these days.
Yeah.
But I can see how taking that time to tune into your internal world could make a big difference in your emotional intelligence. What about journaling? Does that help?
Yeah, journaling can be really helpful. By writing down your thoughts and feelings, you can start to see patterns, identify triggers, gain a deeper understanding of yourself.
It's like having a personal therapist in a notebook. So we're building our self-regard and regard for others. We're practicing our self-awareness. Where does all this lead? What's next?
Well, that brings us to another crucial piece of the JCA global model, emotional resilience.
Ah, resilience. I think getting the hang of this emotional intelligence lingo now. But what does it actually mean to be emotionally resilient?
Imagine you're facing a challenge at work. A project that's gone completely sideways. Someone with high emotional resilience might feel stressed, sure, but they wouldn't crumble under pressure. They'd take a step back, acknowledge their emotions, and then focus on finding a solution.
Okay, so it's not about being some emotionless robot who never feels stressed or upset.
No, not at all. It's about having the ability to bounce back from those difficult situations without letting them completely derail you.
So how do we build this resilience muscle? Is it something we're born with, or can we develop it?
Well, Jim Rees actually uses this great analogy. It's called the E+RO model. It stands for experience plus response equals outcome.
Hang on, I need to write that down.
Yeah.
Experience plus response equals outcome. Okay, I got it.
Yeah.
How does that work in practice?
Okay, so think about a time you were stuck in traffic, right? That's the experience, something you can't control. But your response, whether you get frustrated and stressed or use the time to listen to a podcast or whatever that's going to determine your outcome, do you arrive at your destination calm or a frazzled mess? It's your choice.
That's a really helpful way to think about it. So even when things are completely out of our control, we still have the power to choose our response and influence the outcome. That's pretty empowering.
Exactly. And it's a skill that can be practiced and strengthened over time, just like any other muscle.
This is all starting to make sense. We're building self-awareness, developing resilience. What else is there?
Next, let's explore personal power. And it's actually closely connected to self-regard.
Personal power. That sounds intriguing. Fill me in.
Think of it this way. People with high personal power take responsibility for their lives. They believe they can influence their circumstances, even when things get tough.
So it's not about controlling others. It's about having that I'm in control of my own destiny attitude.
Exactly. They don't waste energy blaming external factors. Instead, they see challenges as opportunities for growth. Someone with low personal power, on the other hand, might feel like a victim of circumstance.
They might say things like, oh, it's all their fault, or there's nothing I can do about it. It sounds like those negative thought patterns could really hold someone back.
Absolutely. And guess what? Personal power is often linked to self-regard. If you believe in yourself and your abilities, you're more likely to feel in control of your life.
I see. So if I want to boost my personal power, maybe I need to work on building my self-regard first. It's all coming together now.
You're getting it. And remember, personal power isn't about being domineering or controlling others. It's about owning your choices, taking responsibility for your actions, and believing in your ability to make a difference.
All right, I'm ready to take charge. What's next on our emotional intelligence journey?
Let's talk about goal-directedness.
Goal-directedness, I'm guessing that means like setting goals and achieving them. Sounds pretty straightforward.
Well, it is about setting goals, but it's also about the energy and focus you bring to that pursuit. Think of those laser-focused individuals who just get things done. They're not easily distracted, they set clear objectives, and they have the persistence to see things through.
I admire those people. They seem to have an endless supply of motivation. But wouldn't being overly goal-directed make someone a workaholic, maybe?
That's a great question. It's definitely something to watch out for. There's a potential downside to being overly reliant on goal-directedness. You might neglect other important areas of life, like relationships or self-care, leading to burnout.
So it's not about becoming a goal-achieving machine. It's about finding that balance between being driven and focused while also taking care of yourself and your relationships.
Exactly. And sometimes individuals with high goal-directedness might actually score lower on other scales, like emotional resilience or personal power. Like they're overcompensating by pushing themselves even harder to achieve their goals.
So it's like they're using goal-directedness as a way to avoid dealing with other emotional challenges.
Precisely. It's important to be aware of these patterns and strive for balance across all the scales.
This deep dive is making me think about my own, EI strengths and weaknesses. I'm already starting to see some areas where I could improve. What's next on our emotional intelligence agenda?
Now let's move on to the relationship management scales, starting with flexibility. These scales delve into how you manage yourself during your interactions with other people.
Okay, I'm ready to learn how to be a better relationship manager. Bring on the flexibility.
Think about how you react when plans change unexpectedly. Do you get flustered, frustrated, or can you adapt quickly and go with the flow? That's flexibility in action.
I have to admit, I sometimes struggle with flexibility, especially when, I've been meticulously planning something. I like to be in control.
Yeah, it's understandable to feel that way. But in a world that's constantly changing, being able to adapt is crucial. Individuals with high flexibility can adjust their approach, embrace new information, and navigate those unexpected twists and turns with grace.
So it's about being open to change, even when it throws a wrench in your plans. But what happens when someone lacks flexibility? How does that play out?
Okay, so imagine you're working on a team project and suddenly the deadline gets moved up. Someone with low flexibility might get overwhelmed, dig in their heels, and resist the change, creating tension and conflict within the team.
Oh, I've definitely worked with people like that.
Yeah.
Their rigidity ends up making things harder for everyone. So flexibility is about being adaptable and open to new information. What's next on the list of relationship management skills?
Let's talk about authenticity, which is closely tied to connecting with others.
Authenticity, that's a big one. What does it actually mean to be authentic in the context of, emotional intelligence?
Well, it's about aligning your actions with your words.
Mm.
People can sense when someone is being fake or putting on a facade. True authenticity comes from being genuine, transparent, and true to yourself.
So it's about showing up as your true self, not trying to be someone you're not.
Exactly. And authenticity is especially important in leadership.
Sure.
Think about a leader who says one thing but does another.
Ugh, I've worked for leaders like that. It completely erodes trust and makes it hard to respect them.
You're right. That lack of authenticity can have a huge impact on team morale and productivity. People want to work for leaders who are genuine and trustworthy.
So authenticity is about walking the talk and being true to yourself, especially when you're in a leadership position. What's next on our list of relationship management essentials?
Let's talk about trust.
Okay, trust. I think we all know how important trust is in any relationship. But how does the JCA Global Model approach this concept?
Well, it acknowledges that there's a healthy middle ground between being too trusting and being too mistrustful. The ideal is to be, carefully trusting.
So it's not about blindly trusting everyone you meet.
Exactly. It's about being open to connecting with others while also being discerning. You don't have to share your deepest secrets with everyone, but you're also not walking around suspicious of everyone's motives.
It's about finding that balance between guarding your heart and being open to connection.
Precisely. Now, imagine someone who's extremely mistrustful. They might have difficulty forming close relationships, have trouble delegating tasks, and constantly second-guess everyone's intentions.
That sounds exhausting. I can see how that lack of trust would create a lot of friction in both personal and professional relationships.
On the other hand, someone who's overly trusting might be naive, easily manipulated, or overly dependent on others for validation.
So both extremes can be problematic. It's about finding that sweet spot of carefully trusting, which probably takes a lot of self-awareness and practice.
You're absolutely right. It's a skill that can be developed over time.
This deep dive has given me a lot to think about. Trust is so fundamental to everything we do.
Absolutely. And it's closely tied to another important scale in the relationship management cluster, balanced outlook.
Balanced outlook. Tell me more about that one.
This scale is all about how you view the world and your expectations for the future. The ideal is to be, realistically optimistic. This means you're hopeful and positive, but also grounded in reality.
So it's not about wearing rose-colored glasses and pretending everything is perfect.
Not at all. It's about acknowledging challenges and setbacks, while maintaining a belief in your ability to overcome them.
It's that glass half full perspective, but with a dose of pragmatism.
Exactly. Now let's talk about the two extremes. On one end of the spectrum, we have pessimistic. Individuals who are pessimistic tend to focus on the negative, expect the worst, and have difficulty seeing opportunities.
They're the doom and gloom types who always anticipate things going wrong.
Exactly. And that negativity can be contagious, draining the energy from those around them.
It's like they suck the joy out of everything. Not exactly fun to be around.
Definitely not.
Oh.
On the other end of the spectrum, we have over-optimistic. Individuals who are over-optimistic might be overly idealistic, naive, or prone to making impulsive decisions without considering potential risks.
They might be the Pollyanna types who believe everything will always work out perfectly, even when the evidence suggests otherwise.
Exactly. And that lack of realism can lead to disappointments and setbacks.
So it's about finding that balance, being hopeful, but also realistic.
Precisely. And a key part of that balance is the ability to engage in critical thinking.
Okay, that's an important distinction.
Yeah.
How do we differentiate between pessimism and critical thinking?
That's a great question. Pessimism is a negative mindset that focuses on the worst-case scenario. Critical thinking, on the other hand, is a skill that allows you to analyze information objectively, identify potential problems, and develop solutions.
So critical thinking is about being realistic and problem-solving, while pessimism is about dwelling on negativity.
Exactly. And that brings us to another important scale in the relationship management cluster: emotional expression and control.
Emotions, that's a big one. How does this scale play out in our relationships with others?
Well, this scale is all about how we express and manage our emotions when interacting with others. The ideal is to be free and in charge of your emotions.
That sounds like a superpower. What does it mean to be free and in charge of your emotions?
It means you're aware of your emotions, you can express them appropriately, and you don't let them control your behavior. You're able to stay calm and composed even in challenging situations.
It's like having that inner thermostat that keeps your emotions at a comfortable temperature.
Exactly. Now let's talk about the two extremes. On one end of the spectrum, we have under-controlled. Individuals who are under-controlled might be impulsive, volatile, or easily provoked. They might lash out in anger, say things they later regret, and have difficulty regulating their emotional responses.
They're the ones who have those dramatic outbursts that leave everyone feeling uncomfortable.
Exactly. On the other end of the spectrum, we have over-controlled. Individuals who are over-controlled might bottle up their emotions, avoid conflict, and struggle to express themselves authentically.
So they're the ones who keep everything inside, never letting their true feelings show.
Precisely. And while it might seem like over-control is preferable to under-control, both extremes can be problematic.
So it's about finding that balance, being able to express your emotions authentically while also maintaining composure.
Exactly. And that balance is essential for building strong, healthy relationships.
This is all making me realize how much work goes into building emotional intelligence. It's not just about being, nice or friendly. It's about developing a whole set of skills and strategies for navigating the complexities of human interaction.
You're absolutely right. And speaking of navigating complexities, let's move on to another crucial skill in the relationship management cluster: conflict handling.
Conflict handling. That sounds a bit intimidating. I feel like some people, just love conflict, while others, like me, would rather just avoid it at all costs.
It's definitely a skill that takes practice, but the good news is that the JCA Global Model emphasizes an assertive approach to conflict, which is that middle ground between, passive and aggressive.
Okay, assertive sounds promising, but what does that actually look like in, a real-life conflict situation?
Think about it this way. Someone with an assertive conflict style can stand up for themselves and their needs. While still being respectful of the other person's perspective, they use clear, direct communication to express their thoughts and feelings. But they don't resort to attacking or blaming.
So it's about disagreeing without being disagreeable.
Yeah.
I like that.
Exactly. Now contrast that with a passive approach. Someone who's passive might avoid conflict altogether, suppressing their own needs just to keep the peace.
Yeah, I know a few people like that. They're always saying yes, even when they mean no.
And while it might seem like the nice way to handle conflict, it can actually lead to resentment and frustration down the road.
Yeah, it's like they're letting themselves get walked all over.
Yeah.
Not exactly a recipe for healthy relationships.
Right. And then on the flip side, there's the aggressive approach.
Yeah.
This is where someone tries to win at all costs. Even if it means, damaging the relationship, they might resort to yelling, blaming, or even bullying to get their way.
That sounds more like a battle than a conversation.
You're right. Both passivity and aggression can create unnecessary drama and damage relationships. Assertiveness, on the other hand, allows you to address issues directly, find solutions that work for everyone involved, and maintain those healthy boundaries.
This is making me rethink my whole approach to conflict. Any tips for becoming more assertive?
Well, Jim Rees offers a great tip in his guide. He says, before difficult conversation, try to step into the other person's shoes, consider their perspective, and try to understand where they're coming from.
That's such great advice. It's so easy to get caught up in your own point of view and forget that the other person has, their own thoughts, their own feelings and experiences.
Exactly. That simple act of empathy can go a long way in de-escalating a tense situation.
All right. I'm ready to add a sort of conflict handler to my resume. What's next on our emotional intelligence deep dive?
Let's talk about interdependence.
Interdependence. Is that like needing people to, survive, like can't live without them?
Well, not quite in the literal sense, but it does involve finding that balance between being too independent and too dependent on others. The ideal is to be interdependent.
Okay, so what does that actually look like in practice?
Someone who's interdependent is comfortable relying on others when needed, but they're also capable of making their own decisions and taking initiative. They understand that we all need each other, but they also, value their own autonomy.
So it's like Being a team player but not losing yourself in the process.
Exactly. Now, let's imagine someone who's overly independent. They might be fiercely self-reliant, have difficulty asking for help, and resist collaboration.
They're the lone wolf types who think they can do it all themselves.
Right. While self-reliance is a great quality taken to the extreme, it can lead to isolation and burnout.
So it's like they're trying to climb Mount Everest without a Sherpa.
Exactly. Then there's the other extreme, being overly dependent.
Those are the folks who always need someone to hold their hand and tell them what to do, right?
Exactly. While having a supportive network is important, overdependence can, stifle personal growth and even create resentment in relationships.
Got it. So interdependence is about finding that sweet spot, being confident and self-reliant, while also being open to, collaboration and support when needed.
Precisely. And here's where it gets really interesting. Your interdependence score is often linked to your self-regard and regard for others.
Okay, I'm sensing a pattern here. Those two scales seem to be at the root of so much. How does this connection play out with interdependence?
Think about it. If you have high self-regard but low regard for others, you might be more likely to be overly independent.
You might think, I don't need anyone else. I'm awesome. I can handle it all myself.
Exactly. But if you have low self-regard and high regard for others, you might lean towards being overly dependent.
You might say, I'm not good enough. I need someone to tell me what to do.
Precisely. It all comes back to that balance we've been talking about.
This deep dive is really making me think about how all these different aspects of emotional intelligence are interconnected, It's like a complex puzzle where all the pieces fit together.
That's a great way to put it. And it highlights the importance of addressing all the scales, not just focusing on one or two.
So what's the final piece of this emotional intelligence puzzle?
Let's talk about reflective learning.
Reflective learning, what's that all about? Sounds kind of academic.
It might sound that way, but it's actually a very practical skill. Think of it as hitting the pause button on life and taking the time to reflect on your experiences, both good and bad.
Okay, I can see how taking that time to step back and analyze things could be helpful. But honestly, I'm usually so focused on just getting things done that I rarely take the time to actually, reflect.
You're not alone. In our fast-paced world, reflective learning is often overlooked. But Jim Rees argues that it can actually be a competitive advantage, both for individuals and organizations.
Oh, interesting.
How so? Well, think about it. If you're not taking the time to learn from your mistakes, you're likely to keep repeating them, right? But if you consciously reflect on what went wrong, you can identify patterns, adjust your approach, and make better decisions in the future.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like that saying, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it.
Exactly. And Jim Rees recommends a simple but powerful framework for reflective learning. It's called the Win, Learn, Change framework.
I love a good framework. Tell me more.
Well, it's based on 3 simple questions. What worked well? What did I or we learn? And what needs to change?
Those are such powerful questions. I can see how regularly asking yourself those questions could lead to some, major personal and professional growth.
You're right. Reflective learning is about turning your experiences into valuable lessons that can help you navigate the future with more wisdom and skill.
This deep dive has been incredibly insightful. I'm feeling inspired to start incorporating some of these practices into my own life.
That's fantastic to hear. And remember, emotional intelligence is a journey, not a destination. It's about continuous growth and development.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Emotional intelligence, it's not just about our individual skills. It's about how we interact with the world around us.
So it's not enough to just work on, our own self-awareness and resilience. The environment we're in also plays a role.
Yeah, think about it this way. Imagine 2 different workplaces, right? One where people feel safe to speak up, share their ideas, and take risks. And another where there's a culture of fear, blame, and micromanagement.
Okay, yeah, I can definitely see how those different environments would have a huge impact on people's, emotional well-being. In a supportive environment, you're more likely to feel valued, respected, and empowered. You're more likely to take initiative, collaborate effectively, and be resilient in the face of challenges. But in a toxic environment, well, you might become withdrawn, disengaged, or even cynical.
It's like your emotional intelligence gets stifled by, negativity and fear.
Exactly. So it's crucial to be mindful of the environments we create, both for ourselves and for the people around us.
So what can we actually do to create more emotionally intelligent environments? Where do we even begin?
It starts with fostering a culture of open communication and feedback. creating a space where people feel safe to share their thoughts and feelings, both positive and negative.
So it's about building that psychological safety, right? Where
Mhm.
people know they won't be, punished for speaking up.
Precisely. And it's important to model that openness yourself.
Yeah.
Be willing to share your own experiences, both successes and failures, and encourage others to do the same.
Yeah, I've definitely noticed that when leaders are willing to be vulnerable, it makes a huge difference. It creates a more authentic and connected environment.
Absolutely. Another key is to encourage collaboration and teamwork. When people work together toward a common goal, it creates a sense of shared purpose and belonging.
It's like that saying, teamwork makes the dream work.
Exactly. And when people feel like they're part of a team, they're more likely to support each other, celebrate each other's successes, and be resilient in the face of challenges.
This is all so inspiring. It really highlights how emotional intelligence can create positive change, not just in our own lives, but in the world around us.
It all starts with awareness. The more we understand ourselves and others, the more effectively we can navigate the complexities of human interaction and create a more positive and fulfilling world.
This deep dive has been so incredibly valuable. I'm feeling energized and ready to put all of this into practice. Thank you for guiding me through this fascinating world of emotional intelligence.
It's been my pleasure. And remember, you don't have to do it all at once. Start small, focus on one area that resonates with you, and build from there.
One thing that's really stuck with me is that idea of finding balance between head and heart, independence and interdependence, optimism and realism.
Yeah.
It seems like that's the key to unlocking the power of emotional intelligence.
You've hit the nail on the head. Emotional intelligence is all about finding that sweet spot. It's not about being overly emotional or overly rational, but about integrating both. And when you can achieve that balance, you're well on your way to a happier, healthier, and more fulfilling life.
So knowing all this about emotional intelligence, what one small change could you make today to become a bit more self-aware? See what you notice. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. It's been an incredible journey.